something each time we get together that makes us even more and bigger and greater and more healed and makes us better for the world. So I want to say hi to Amnon. Hello. He's very busy over there.
Hello.
How are
How are
you?
you?
I'm good. And you?
Just fine, thanks.
Good, 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 good. So we're really excited about today, and I want to just welcome. We have two guests. Hopefully, we have one on video, and hopefully we will have one on voice because we're having little techie problems there for a few minutes. So let me tell you who and what we're doing today. So today we're going to focus on philanthropy and giving and making that choice is what cause are you going to wrap your heart around, and why do you do that? And do each of us do it differently? And what's the passions that allow us or inspire us to do the things that we do? And also keep in mind that it's about us now. That's part of why I'm so interested in this subject matter, because if it's going to be, it's going to be because of you and me and how we come together and how we share and how we make a difference, how we get around something and rally for it. Because we can't rely on, even to the point of grant writing or, any of those things. We have to fundraise between ourselves and we have to create what we're going to create. So that's why I think it's so important. And I also am very curious as to what is trending today as far as giving. Are there certain areas in the nonprofit arena that people are more interested in focusing in on? Are there areas that need focusing in on? So we have a lot of things to talk about. And my first guest today, one of my first guests, is Leslie Starsenek. And Leslie has more than 25 years of experience working in and around the nonprofit community. She has had a long career in philanthropy, including helping individuals and groups develop fundraising strategies and examining what makes people want or not want to give. So that is Leslie. And then we're going to say hello to Leslie. Hi, Leslie. Oops, we don't have her sound. Hey, Leslie.
Hey, Marilyn.
How are you?
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for being here. And then also, and I'm not sure if Kevin is coming in yet or not, but Kevin Snyder will be our other guest. And Kevin is a speaker and an author, and he does all kinds of interesting things. He does a lot of speaking on our university campuses and all over. And he has a big passion for giving and being involved. And I like the combination of Leslie and Kevin because I think we're going to hear different perspectives, one from a woman, one from a man. And it's going to be an interesting conversation. And most recently, he led a fundraising initiative for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society in their annual Man and Woman of the Year campaign, and he raised $25,000. Of course, Kevin has a little personal connection to the Cancer and Lymphoma Society, so we're going to hear about that as soon as he can connect. But in the meantime, let's start with Leslie. Welcome, Leslie, once again.
Thanks, Marilyn. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Me too. So tell us a little bit of personally, not just me reading your bio, but a little personal about your work and what you do and your passion behind what you do.
So part of what I do is really to try to work with nonprofit organizations, charities, to create an effective message for people to want to support their work. And so that can be anything from training boards of directors to developing fundraising plans for them. You talked a little bit about this difference between grants and individual giving, so kind of talking with them about how to have that healthy balance in their organizations. And then the other work I do is really around kind of public policy and helping to address primarily issues related to healthy families and children. The passion, I guess, goes back a long way, but I've always looked at philanthropy and the nonprofit sector as a legitimate place for me to have a professional career. So it's not only been about having passion for a particular issue, but really believing there's a legitimate place for charitable giving, and that those organizations on the ground really have a big part of playing what the quality of life for all of us is about. So I get energized every time I meet a new organization and hear about the good work they do.
So you kind of work both ends of the stick, So what I'm hearing, as far as the public policy, and then directly in fundraising, so you're kind of covering the gamut, I would say. Is that correct?
I do, and I've worked with large funders. So, for instance, the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation in Winston-Salem, I worked with for a while, talking through what their strategic directions were for funding all these organizations on the ground, and then from the organization's perspective, how do they raise money? How do they make time to do that? What's a good plan for them to put in place? How do they really talk about what it is they do and what impact they have in the community?
So are you noticing trends now in how people are giving, or what they're giving to, or the message? Let me ask for that first. Are you noticing a trend?
I am, and in thinking about talking with you today, that the sort of two things that came to mind that are relatively new on the scene of giving are giving circles, which is a different way of giving, and also just that people who typically have been donors are finding themselves in the position of being fundraisers themselves. And by that, I mean there's a lot of energy around platforms like CrowdRise, which is a website that you can go on and essentially build your own website, tell your story, set an amount that you're trying to raise, and then solicit, friends, families, colleagues to support that cause. And so both of those things really bring the person closer to the cause, right? It's much different than filling out a solicitation that you might get in the mail and mailing back a check. It really puts people much, much closer to the cause. And I think that just sort of confirms what we know about giving, which is it's a very personal thing for people, and they want to be as connected to the cause, to the issue, to know where their money is going as possible. And that, again, that transition from writing a check to an organization to actually soliciting support on behalf of the organization, I think is an important trend to pay attention to.
So why is there a shift, do you think? Why are people recognizing that now?
I think there are two things going on with that. I think that, I think the shift is people want to feel more connected to what it is they're giving to, and you're not necessarily going to be able to leverage larger dollars unless they feel that connection. And I think Kevin and I can maybe talk about this, but I think that the research is certainly clear that women in particular say, there has to be meaning. I have to feel connected to the organization. I have to go look at it. I have to maybe go talk to people who take advantage of the services there for me to feel good about giving and for me to potentially become a bigger or more regular giver. So I think that there's also sort of related to that kind of an accountability piece that I want to know that where my dollars go are really having an impact, that money is being handled well, that there is a responsible board of directors and leader of the organization that has a vision that can tell me what their impact is. Rather than, again, kind of feeling this disconnected, let me go ahead and send in $25 or $50 a year to an organization that I have a little bit of information about, but really don't feel that connection.
I think it's so interesting that you're seeing that now. We're seeing that now because it's a direct correlation, I would like to think, to how we're evolving, how people are evolving, how they're connecting more, how it makes so much more of a difference now to know, as you said, where's my money going? Is it paying for the carpeting? Is it paying for supplies? I want to earmark where my money is going. I want to know where my money is going, not just that it's going to the Cancer Society or it's going here, it's going there, but what is it buying? Can I see the result, right?
That's right. That's right. I referenced giving circles, which is really kind of a model of collective giving. Which can be very informal. So a bunch of folks from the neighborhood can get together. I started one here at Briar Creek about 7 or 8 years ago, where we just brought people together to talk about what was important to us. And it really did create a much more hands-on experience for people. So in order to promote or nominate a charity for everyone to write a check to, you had to go out and do some research. You had to go visit the organization. You had to come back and be able to talk about their budget and their programs and their gaps. And really make that argument to your friends while sitting around drinking glasses of wine with each other of why you thought every person in that group ought to write a check towards the organization. So again, it's taking on that kind of funding role and creating a much closer connection. And people feel a much greater sense of satisfaction, I think, when they can really see their dollars at work.
Yeah, and I would also say that it's in keeping with this whole notion of sustainability. Because if you're going to have to go back out there and find these donors again, it's very tough. Donors are few and far between. The money is getting scarcer and scarcer. So when a nonprofit or some charitable organization or cause is connected to an individual, and they want to keep them. They want to keep that connection. They want to keep that relationship as if, we're all family here, right? Are you finding that it's allowing for people of all economic brackets to be able to donate now and fundraise, because it's not just the big boys with the big money and the big families, that it's each and every one of us are called to arms?
Yeah, and there are a couple developments, I think, that go to that. It's funny when you put philanthropist underneath my name, generally that means that I have $10 billion that I'm going to give away, right? And to me, it really just means that I'm invested and interested in being part of philanthropic giving. So the two things that come to mind that sort of have to do with how much money do you really need in order to make an impact. One is this idea that you can make recurring donations, right? So you can go on an organization's website and you can give them $10 a month for a year, and you can, and so the way things are framed are really, think about what you spend on lunch one day out a week or stops at Starbucks, and give in that way, so that it's not a painful check to write. It's just something that becomes a routine part of your support. The other is planned giving. So really thinking about what you can do after you're gone. My husband and I have a fund at the North Carolina Community Foundation where we have described kind of parameters of where we want our money to go after we're gone. And so that fund is in our will and talks about what we'd like to see happen and what the issues are that are important to us. And so again, that's a pretty painless way to give money and really think about what is most important to you and what would it look like.
Good point. I worked at a news organization several, I want to say several instead of many years ago, called the Philanthropy News Network. And it was a news organization, a nonprofit news organization, and we, had it online, offline, all that kind of stuff. And I remember we had a conference, and someone from Merrill Lynch spoke at the conference, and I will never forget these words. Not exactly, but this was the sentiment. That if you were going to be a nonprofit and you were going to stay around, you had, for many years to come, you had to treat yourself as a business, because nobody wanted to donate money, give money to any nonprofit that wasn't going to be around. So,
right.
So you had to run your board, you had to run what you did as a legitimate business. Just like Leslie said when she first spoke, she said this was a legitimate career. Absolutely. Because if you're going to be a nonprofit, if you don't look at it as a legitimate business, you're not going to stay around. The money's going to go. So who wants to put, good money to something that isn't going to hang around? So are you finding that the, funders are getting younger and they're doing different kinds of things besides just giving money? Are they volunteering more of their time?
Yeah, so to me, the old idea of volunteering or community service would be that you might, go serve a meal at a soup kitchen, maybe on the holidays or maybe in other parts of the year. There's another aspect of community service or volunteering that we've sort of touched on that's also a fair amount of my work, and that is board of director service. And there's some, I don't know who termed this phrase, but I read somewhere that a board of directors is a group of highly effective people who function as a very inefficient group. And so, we have this model where we've got volunteers who are essentially in charge of governing an organization, hiring and firing the CEO, are responsible for it being fiscally solvent, to your point, that it's going to be around in the future, that you're going to be able to show how it's going to be around. And so that is a vital part of volunteering in the community, and one that, again, a lot of people just aren't aware of what's involved in a board, don't know that they have the expertise or the skills to be able to function and be a productive member. But again, that gets you sort of one step closer to the organization and having meaning to the time and skills that you invest in something that's close to you.
Perfect. Well, I want to welcome Kevin, because I just found out that he's with us now. Kevin, you there?
Sure am. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Right.
Welcome. How are you?
Lovely. Thank
you. Good. So you've been listening, I think, to the show, right? So you know where we are.
I do, yes.
Good. So I know that you have a different, maybe not a different perspective on fundraising and nonprofit work and giving and philanthropy, but not from a professional perspective, but from a giver, right? So talk
True.
some about what you've been doing.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I would say there's really nothing I disagree with so far. It's just my perspective has been more from a participant in various fundraising causes. And my background's mostly student affairs, and I've done several things where we raise money for different groups like St. Jude, Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, various cancer societies. And most recently was involved with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society's annual, what they call Man and Woman of the Year campaign, which was a 10-week fundraising initiative that was an amazing experience, but also quite an undertaking. And our group raised in the 10-week period about $25,000 overall. The entire campaign, with the other candidates, raised over $650,000. So it was amazing, and I learned a lot about why people donated. I led a team of people, so I also, from the participant perspective, why those people actually joined the team that we created, and it was very enlightening, not just throughout the 10 weeks, but also even preparing for that as well.
So, what was the inspiration? And let me ask you this: do we need an inspiration to inspire us to connect with a particular cause, or is it just we want to do something good for somebody? Kevin, from your perspective.
Sure. I look back at some of my earlier days. I remember literally one time I was sitting in an organization and they had nobody to lead this 5K that was going to benefit cancer research. And I had never run a 5K. I had no interest in it, but I couldn't believe that we were not going to do this opportunity that was for the betterment, of people who would need it. And so I literally, maybe it was probably the spirit, but my hand shot up. And that was, I had no connection to it. I'm blessed to come from a healthy family, I guess. But fast forward about 10 years later, which was earlier last year, my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer. And when I heard about the opportunity with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, I literally felt as if that was something that I could do. So I was personally connected to the cause, and it wasn't just, although my sister had breast cancer and I was working with leukemia and lymphoma, it's almost as if cancer doesn't discriminate, and I felt like it was my chance to do something. And most of the people that I found, a lot of the people that are dedicated on the campaign team that we created, as well as the donors, most everybody that invested a considerable amount of time had a personal connection. They knew that what they were doing had meaning, and they were committed to it. And I think that's one of the keys that you have to, when you're reaching out to people too, to support any initiatives, you really have to be sure your story is clear, and it's something that people try to find out what they connect with as well. And that's what helped us at least be successful in our recent undertaking.
Makes sense. What do you think, Leslie?
Well, it's funny. I knew that Kevin's name was familiar to me, and I just realized that the reason it's familiar is I was also on a team for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society 2014 Man Year Women of the Year campaign this year. So I'm thinking about what he's saying and sort of processing it. So one of the things two things I guess that stuck with me most about that campaign. One is in a lot of circumstances, all you need to do is ask, and people will give, and they'll either give because the issue will resonate with them, or, and I'm sure Kevin experienced this, they'll give because you're asking, because you say this is important to me, and you want that direct connection to the issue. But in a lot of cases, thinking back about how people are becoming not just givers but fundraisers through their own CrowdRise pages. I think that's important to keep in mind. The second thing I learned is this: I was just reminded at how difficult fundraising is for a lot of people, how uncomfortable it is for them to ask people for money. So you need your ducks in a row, and you need to have have done your homework in terms of what your message is, what you're asking for, what that gift will represent. But a lot of people sort of fall apart when it comes down to, can you go out and solicit friends, families, colleagues with a strong case. And I think, again, boards of directors struggle with that. A lot of folks struggle with that. I did some work a couple years ago with the alumni rugby team at a university in Ohio, and they needed to raise money to support the rugby team on campus. And this was a room full of 10, 15 really successful business people that when you put them in the seat of asking for charitable gifts, sort of all those skills kind of went out the window in terms of planning, messaging, branding, and people get a little bit stuck on that. So while we saw a huge outpouring of support through the campaign, we also saw that bubble up for people to say, well, I can't ask for a gift from somebody. I can't sort of cross that line.
Well, it's interesting. I'm hearing both of you say something, and I want to address this notion of that people can't, put themselves in a position of asking. But I think that it's interesting because sometimes we can't do that when it's our own job. We can't ask for the next sale. We can't ask for the next speaking engagement. We can't ask for the next book thing. And I think that it's so important to put yourself in a position of connecting with your vision for whatever it is. What is your dream for whatever it is? What is your mission for whatever it is? I know, Leslie, you don't have that personal connection to everything and every nonprofit you work on. And Kevin, you mentioned earlier that when you were asked, you stepped up to do this 5K thing, you didn't even run. So there's something that you connect with. There's some reason, some support of something that allows you to do something that you might not have been comfortable to do before. What do you think about that, Kevin?
No, I would agree with that. I look back at all the experiences I've been involved with, and it really boils down to some sort of feeling like I'm contributing, giving meaning, being significant, and I have no shame in saying that. I think that's a great purpose too, to feel. And in fact, one of our mottos recently was, "What we do today makes a difference tomorrow," and really connecting people with, you can do something. It doesn't matter how much or if it's even something that involves a financial gift, but just to get engaged with something, because when it does hit home, it hits hard. Like our family never thought, we'd get that phone call from my sister was 32 years old and had breast cancer, and we thought we definitely thought it was a false positive until we realized, it's here. But it is tough. I tell you that I wouldn't say the word struggle, but our team definitely, asking for those gifts was something that I think most people, it's not easy to do. It's kind of a gift in itself of being able to have that skill to do that. And but it's also, if you don't ask, then how do people know how to help?
Right. You're never going to get if you don't ask. So, that's one, that's an important point. So, Leslie, what would you say about that as far as...
This idea of So I kind of have two thoughts about, asking for support for an issue that personally affects you, and there's a lot of power in that, and certainly personal testimony. There's also part of me that feels like it's all of our jobs to support things that make our community stronger. So in some ways, I feel like, people who've not been affected by an issue that are out there fundraising for it have sort of a different way of, a different persuasive voice. So I serve on the board of the Lucy Daniels Center, which provides mental health services to young children. I don't have children. I'm not a parent. And so sometimes the first blush is, what are you doing serving on that board? But the second is, wow, they must do really good work if you don't have a child that has gotten services there, or you don't have a story to tell. But I'm persuaded by the mission. I'm persuaded by how they get at making change for the community. And there's something I think about not setting an expectation, for instance, that leukemia and lymphoma survivors, for instance, need to be the folks that are doing all the legwork. I think we, again, as a collective community, to say this is important, this is something that will improve the quality of life for people as well as the broader community is an important part to play. So I don't necessarily think people need to go out and find an issue that resonates with them personally because of their experience. They're issues that can resonate with you for all sorts of reasons.
Just for mankind purposes, period.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just want to remind everyone out there that we would welcome you to call in to 919-518-9773. And if you're somewhere else in the world and don't have access to a phone, please feel free to come in on computers. That's plural, the number 2, K voice. And you can certainly chat with us and ask questions or share your experiences of volunteering or philanthropy. And also, we have a chat, which has all kinds of things going on. And you can sign your name in next to the video and just join the chat and ask questions and comment and, listen to what other people are talking about. I really like where this conversation is going because we can't just rely on either the people that have been doing it ongoing, who just have that natural propensity to give and donate their time and give money, but we must expand this circle of giving. You called it a giving circle. We must expand this giving circle so that more and more people will get involved in. Doesn't have to be the biggest of things. It could be just a small role. It could be a one-time thing. It could be just some kind of something so that, we can support all the great work. I mean, if you think about hospice, how in the world, the work that hospice does is it's amazing. What would we do without a hospice? I mean, my father went through hospice. I can't imagine what would have gone on for him or our family if it wasn't for hospice. So there's so many opportunities that, we can each support so much of what's going on. Kevin, I know you have something to add. I can feel it.
I'm marinating. I definitely marinating in a couple thoughts. Keep talking then, Marilyn.
Okay.
I'll jump in.
I wanted to ask you, what is this crowd rise, Leslie? I think I wrote it down right. What is that?
Yeah, so it's it's a platform. If you go to crowdrise.com or .org, anyway, you essentially build your own fundraising website, and so you can have a campaign. Say that you decide, Marilyn, that your local homeless shelter needs some new air conditioning units, and you can go on to CrowdRise and you can build your own page, and you can explain to your potential givers why this is an issue that's important to you. You can set a goal for how much you want to raise and for what purpose, and you'll have, and this is all free for you to set up your own website, and you'll have a way to keep track of people that give to you, to have sort of a barometer going. So again, it's kind of a way of taking control. So it's just one of the free products that are out there to essentially host your own campaign for whatever issue is important to you.
So it's kind of like Kickstarter and things
Right,
like that,
exactly.
but for the nonprofit arena.
Exactly. And I do, I just to follow up just for one comment on our last conversation, I think, most people are generous and philanthropic by nature. I think one of the big gaps is that people don't understand what the needs are in the community. And often if you educate them about what some of the needs are, they will give. They just need to be, again, told the story in a way that is persuasive. The economic downturn in a lot of ways really bubbled up this idea of they're just our basic human needs that aren't being met. And I think people are they're very persuaded by natural disasters and by people not having enough food to eat, for instance. So kind of getting back to the basics, and they need to understand what that looks like in their own community, and again, what the impact of their dollars might be to try to alleviate some of that.
Right. Exactly. I mean, because, every disaster I've ever, God knows, been a part of, people just rise to the occasion without being asked, neighbor to neighbor, whatever. It's just always been just amazing, and I think that every time those things happen, we are closer, we are more connected, we are more caring. Unfortunately, it comes from, well, I always say freedom comes from lack of freedom. I mean, how are you going to know what freedom is unless you have to free yourself from something. So I think this notion of these disasters, be it hurricanes, bombings, whatever they are, tornadoes, I think people really do rise, and it gets them closer, and the feeling, those seeds never go away, those seeds of love and connection. So it makes it easier for future giving. Right. So Kevin, I'm ready to ask you another question, but I wanted to make sure if you had anything on your mind that you wanted to express Sure. at this point.
Well, one thing I was hoping to have some sort of filtered or I guess what's the word I'm looking for? Something that I asked a large handful of my guy friends and said, hey, what is it about service and philanthropy that motivates you? And why are you involved? And I was hoping to kind of find a common denominator. And quite frankly, people were pretty all over the board with why they invested some time. It did for the most part boil down to a personal connection or a personal cause or something they found meaning in. But some people felt it was more connected to their spiritual being. Some people said and acknowledged, hey, it's part of what my business always does. So I was hoping to be able to share some groundbreaking, thoughts from at least, hey, this is from a short handful of what my guy givers feel, but for whatever that's worth.
Well, okay, so you didn't see anything directly. However, from what you've observed, from being on a team and watching other people and being part of a team, have you observed any difference in the way men ask as opposed to women, or are they inspired by something different, Kevin?
The lens at which I'd answer that is looking at my most recent experience. We had a team of over 21 people, and every single male in that team had a personal connection to cancer of some sort. And the women did as well, actually. So for me personally, though, I worked very hard when I was developing that team to be a good talent scout. I wanted to connect with people who understood what we were doing. So that's the bias at which I probably am answering that.
Okay.
I would say, looking back at how we did what we did, I think the men probably went with a more, hey, I got it, I'll fix it. They were probably a little bit more independent. They kind of focused. They did a little more on their own versus the women that were better with getting a team together and kind of corralling the group.
That's an interesting point. So you're saying that the men, a little from your observation, might have been more apt to fixing and doing more things on their own, whereas the women would be more into like the teamwork perspective. Is that right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, and I can think of one of the activities we did where that would be actually the complete opposite. But for the most part, yeah, not to get into generalities too much.
It's interesting.
But yeah.
What do you think, Leslie? Is there a difference between the men and the women?
Sure. I mean, yeah, and I guess I'll tell you what I think the difference between men and women is, but I also think one of the key factors for people to either become givers or not is whether or not they're exposed to giving as children. So I would say that on our team, which was primarily women, there were people who would be exposed to charitable needs and asked to support, and their first thought would be, how could I not support this? How could I not do something? How could I not take some action? How could I not write a check? There are other people whose reaction is, well, this isn't my responsibility, and it doesn't resonate with me, and it doesn't affect me. And I think being exposed to philanthropy as a child is really important. I know folks who, very early on put their children in positions to choose charities, to give money, to start learning that young. So I think, again, regardless of man or woman, that's an important part of building philanthropists. I said earlier that the research anyway says that women are more interested in sort of attaching meaning to their gift more so than men, so that they're more likely to say, I really want to go visit this organization. I really want to sit down with someone who's received services to really understand what the needs are and what the impact of my dollar is, whereas men don't tend to have that same need. The way that men primarily participated in this last campaign were through events. So, for instance, the golf team putting aside a percentage of what they normally would spend, or dare I say bet, at a golf tournament.
Sure, you can say that.
It's easy, it's painless, it's a good cause. It's one of the guys saying to the other guys, this is not going to be painful for you to do. Come on in and participate. So I think both men and women would be similar in terms of their outlook if they sort of started this journey earlier in their life. But women tend to want to process a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good point. I think setting an expectation, and I think it's something that we should pay attention to and talk about, because setting an expectation now for children of any age, that can understand going and doing things, I mean, I remember taking my children, we're Jewish, and during Christmas, we used to go to work at the hospitals, that to give people off that, for Christmas. And we would go to, locally we have this thing called the Helping Hand Mission, and my children and I would go there and we would give out food, and we would go in the car and, for Christmas, and hand out toys and things. And so we always tried to do things like that. Even recently, when they've all been grown up, we've found ourselves in a kitchen, cooking things that I would never normally find myself cooking, but those are special times of the year that we always did those things. And I think it's important to pay attention to that for everybody that's listening, who have children, grandchildren. It's never too late. It starts with us, and it's never too late for us as adults. It's never too late to say, you know what, I'm going to go to this event and walk it, or I'm going to go to this thing and support it, and take your children, take your grandchildren along, and it's very enjoyable. One year I thought we laid the golden egg when we went to deliver toys to this family. I mean, you would have thought that we were like from heaven. I mean, it was just an amazing experience, and I will never forget that.
Yeah. And this idea that you participate in events, again, that maybe you're not. You haven't been personally affected for, you're there bearing witness for the people that have, and you're saying, I can share your pain, understand it, participate in it, empathize with you, and work on your behalf. And again, I think that's a strong message, and how could people not feel empowered participating in that?
Absolutely. Kevin, what do you think?
The thought that anchored in my mind was when my mom told me one summer, I think I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, and she says, "You're getting involved this summer, whether you like it or not." And she took me to the look. I grew up in downtown Durham, or in Durham, and I remember that summer doing a series of volunteer activities. And at the end of that summer, I actually got an award at this large banquet. And I think at an early age, that conditioned my mind to feel appreciated for giving. And I think that's really important. It was mentioned earlier that whether if you're listening to this and you've got kids, or regardless of your age, everybody can do something. And many times it's how we can inspire other people to give. And when they do, we need to give appreciation for that, because it does matter what we invest our time with. I think what my mom did right there that summer conditioned me to have a feeling of wanting to help others. And looking back, I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I think it really makes a huge difference. And we're needed. I mean, let's face it. I mean, I started with basically that same notion as the world needs us. We are instruments now in doing whatever is possible to heal this planet. And regardless of what it is, it may be a nonprofit work, it may not be, regardless. But I think the other thing is people have this notion of it's going to cost me a lot of money, or it's going to take me a lot of time, or I don't have the time to devote. It's anything you want it to be. It's as much as you want. Amnon, you want to talk about what you just wrote down on the chat? I think it's really, I did this, we did the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and we're talking like early 50s, and there was that can. It was Karen Kayamati said, this is how we bought land in Israel, and then it was for trees, and the money wasn't plentiful by all means, and you would put literally pennies as kids in elementary school, but everybody did it, and we're always waiting until that can would fill up, and the principal will come and empty it and tie it and send it on, and we'll start again. And it was a good feeling just doing it.
Yeah. We used to do that. We used to give money for trees here and land there. I think I don't know if the kids in school do that today. I think they all do little projects. So it's really very valuable. And Chris on the chat just said that when she first moved to North Carolina, she started working for the diabetes because she wanted to make friends. Well, it's a great way of making friends is to get involved in some form of nonprofit work. I mean, you see like-minded people that are passionate, people with a heart. I mean, it's a great way to connect with other people who are just like you. I see you shaking your head, Leslie.
Oh, I'm thinking of I'm thinking of these organizations that I'm naming in particular. But Stop Hunger Now has a great volunteer effort where they package foods that are sent overseas, and they're so well organized in their volunteer effort that they can have 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds help in the assembly of these packages. So again, it's an opportunity to spend time as a family. It's an opportunity to meet other people. I mean, they'll fill up a room with 200 volunteers and pack 10,000 meals for that evening and send them overseas. So the sky's the limit. And as you said, there are endless ways to be involved. It's just a matter of finding out what those opportunities are, what's the best fit for you, and going ahead and making it part of your life. There's some local high schools in Raleigh that require certain numbers of community service in order to graduate, which I think is a great idea, and is just a message that this is just part of being a person, right? It's part of living in the world, is that this is part of what you do, and we hope that you'll carry into adulthood. And to your point, it's never too late to get involved. It's just a matter of, again, finding out what the fit is for you.
Absolutely. Kevin?
Yeah, agree 110%. My background, again, coming from student affairs, is always pleased to see students really just shine through with a variety of causes. I remember at one institution I worked at, we had a volunteer network where every single week they had just a variety of events that the students would come forth with, whether it was blood drives. We had students that would miss class because they wanted to give blood, and they they do it for a variety of reasons. So I think whatever the reason people give is or invest their time, it's about connecting to just maybe doing something, and there is so much out there, that you could support, but that shouldn't stop anyone from not being involved with something. So coming from like when we were asking people for, hey, could you support us, with our leukemia lymphoma recent challenge with $25, $50? Every time I get one of those emails now, I gladly contribute because I know how that feels. In fact, if they would ask me for 100, I probably would give 100, but they only asked me for 25, 50.
Right.
But I know how it feels now, and so I think for me, I just want to support other people in their cause now as well. In addition